Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Yashvendra Singh, Executive Editor of ET and the moderator of this topical session on Shield Against Advancing Threats with Identity Centered Cyber Resilience. Enterprises struggle to maintain pace with ever evolving technologies and the security risks associated with them. With the surge in cyber incidents, it is critical for companies to rethink their security models and adopt advanced weapons. Identity theft is the new perimeter as hackers target users directly. Hence, you should always assume breach because even the best perimeter defenses may fail to stop a deadly attack. To understand and discuss the urgency of cyberproofing, we have with us today top enterprise technology experts. Please join me in welcoming our panelists of the day in alphabetical order. Mr. Dilip George, Managing Director, India in SARC Quest. Mr. Mukesh Jain, CTIO and VP Insights in Data, Capgemini. Mr. Ravi Kethana, Chief Platform Officer, Computer Age Management Services. Mr. Shrikant S, CISO TVS Motor Company. And Mr. Vijay Devnath, GM, INS, MDMS, and CISO, Center for Railway Information Systems. Welcome, gentlemen. I will set the ball rolling with Mr. Jain. Sir, the pandemic has radically altered the threat landscape. To stay on top of the fast changing cybersecurity scenario, CISOs need to analyze the ever evolving security landscape and its trends. How do you think they can ensure this?
Yeah, so yes, things have changed drastically, and we have unprecedented, almost everybody working from remote places, and had to keep a control of that. I think CISO job have become a lot more difficult with that, but I would say a good combination of data, good combination of both preemptive and detective monitoring would definitely help. Some of the things which we have done is ability to detect the continuous usage of those random access from different IP addresses which may not be aware of, and usage pattern. There's a lot of opportunity in artificial intelligence as well to be able to understand the pattern of usage and then see whether the same person, same Mukesh Jain, is coming again, and is the pattern changing or not. Those are some of the innovation further can be done in this area. But right now, we have to making sure the walls are secure, and at the same time, if something is happening, alerting it at the right time. Those are some of the challenges CISO are facing, and keeping it up to date all the time.
Sure, sir, sure. Great. So like you said, artificial intelligence can be leveraged by CISOs in tackling this. I'll move to Mr. Ravi now. Ravi, sir, we've seen wide sweeping business and technology changes taking place in the last, 1 year. All of a sudden, and at an unprecedented level, employees have started working remotely. How do you see this and other trends impacting the cybersecurity landscape? And how can CISOs manage these trends more effectively?
The pandemic has not created the new issues. It's only exposed the existing problems in the landscape. So in the IT industry, who thought people could be an issue in business continuity planning? It was always thought my data centers, my networks and sites, but people never thought that people could be an issue. So, but pandemic only brought the new dimension to people's availability. And if you recall, remote work is an option given to a few people. I mean, that was there even before, long before the pandemic. But what pandemic done was it caused the same given to all because of the necessity. And people also gone for solution to keep the business afloat, and may not have done the serious risk and vulnerability assessment before they launched into a larger workforce. For example, the work from home was given to like mostly like a sales, pre-sales, and some of the leadership people who typically access most of the productivity software, less on any of the enterprise applications. But when we open this application, when we open the remote work from home to the larger workforce who do the work, predominantly we open the entire enterprise application, some of the customer applications to the larger landscape. So then what happened was the entire threat landscape was exponentially increased, and some of the application was not available on the internet before is not available on the internet. And this made very attractive for the threat vectors to relentlessly searching for a loophole to get in. especially the service companies. And people may not be interested in the service companies, but they also work with many of the customers, and they may be a lot more interested in getting into the customers of a service companies. And because that is a very attractive threat landscape. Then also on top of that, some of the practices also made it very difficult for CISOs to protect the enterprise assets. Something like people are using the untrusted internet, and tethering on the mobile phones is one of the biggest issue. And also a lot of people are using a lot of devices. See, once you open this on internet, I can use a tablet, I can use a mobile phone, I can use laptops, desktops, I can also walk into a browsing centers and all. And also people are using someone else's devices. And most importantly is that people are not following a lot of simple security guidelines. When the people are working out of offices, there are a lot of enforcement happens, like a locking the your screen, so on and so forth. But when they're at home, a lot of those things are not followed. And last but not the least is the security updates also becomes a big issue over internet part. So what we can do to control? See, typically CISOs can also do, see, everything opening on a VPN is a very expensive option. What they can do is use the critical, open the critical applications on VPN, and rest can go on through a cloud proxies. And second most important part is the fund it. Fund the home internet for the individuals to use, to prevent them using untrusted Wi-Fi and devices. And it looks very simple, but the most effective use is, most effective defense is the MFA, multi-factor authentication. That really gives us the additional security for it. And on top of that, some of these mobility solutions like MAM and MDM, so that also gives additional security layer to prevent any data leakages, especially for the firms that do a lot of data processing, so on and so forth. And again, recycle the passwords, and frequent VAPTs needs to be done as if there is no tomorrow. And SOC team. See, SOC is the operations centers. Is a typically people do get a lot of alerts and all. But why is some of those things always cause a problem is the people don't act on them as and when it is required. But people needs to be in the current scenario. It has to be worked on a Warfoot basis. So, and these are the lot of solutions, but not everything is applicable for everyone. So enterprises have to decide what works for them and implement diligently and meticulously. Nothing is a flawless execution.
Sure. Sure. Great inputs there, Mr. Ravi. We also have Mr. Devnath with us now. Welcome, sir. Thanks for joining in. I'll come to you later, but I'll first move to Mr. Srikanth now. So, Mr. Srikanth, like Mr. Ravi just said, the pandemic actually exposed the chinks in the armor. Coming from a manufacturing background, I'm sure you have lots of crucial IPs as well. So yes. How do you see CISOs staying on top of these trends that Mr. Ravi and Mukesh Jain just mentioned and secure the crown jewels?
Thanks, Ashwindar. But due to this pandemic, it is not, which is from the year 2017 when the ransomware attack happened. That time itself, this pandemic is started, because every business owner started interesting on the cyber security at that 2017 ransomware attack starts. So there itself we started the pandemic. Now more than that, last 1 year, a lot of people started working from work from home. That scenario. So there, how you are going to business continuity, how you are going to do that. That's what another challenge over there. So major challenges now, the CISOs having major challenges on these areas, because people are working from work from home as well as from office also, and shift also started in the cyber security area also. So those recently there are shift-based also started there. So there are a lot of exposures are happening, but how you are protecting, how you are this complex technologies, how you are managing, the skill set is very important there, which we have to focus on mainly on that area. Since a lot of board members also involved in after this pandemic, this board members also involved in more on cyber security. They are also learning on cyber security and started asking the questions to the CISOs of each companies about the current scenarios in that case. So yes, it has been technology's challenges are there in this.
Sure. Great inputs there, sir. I'll come to Mr. Devnath now. Sir, you joined a little late, so I'll tell you what we were discussing. So we were talking about how the threat landscape changed overnight because of the pandemic. So what should CISOs need to analyze? How can they analyze this ever-evolving security landscape and the trends to stay on top of the threats?
A good question, but I don't know whether I can answer this correctly and fully from the government perspective, because our issues are more to do with the large size of the assets we control. So the first thing which comes into my mind to have a visibility of what you have as assets, which includes both the IT assets as well as the human resource assets. As everybody knows very well now, that human resource is the strongest and the weakest link in our cybersecurity ecosystem, if I can say that. You can have all kinds of technologies, all kinds of equipment, AI, machine learning, etc., to defend yourself. But ultimately, error or oversight or maybe a deliberate work avoidance lands all of us into a soup. So first of all, I will say that point number one, we should have a very accurate and updated inventory of what kind of assets we have, what they are doing, both in terms of technical and non-technical side of the business. Number two, we should be very careful about data which we are collecting and not using. Because what I find in my current role is that we are only running after data, and if the data is not useful, we are not immediately shredding it off, which in the paper world we do it. But in the electronic world, because there is the storage is a commodity today, so we keep on storing everything, anything, everywhere. And then first copy, second copy, cloud copy, local copy, etc. This tendency has to be effectively curbed, maybe through technology or through dictates. In that, our policy is also lacking, because most of the organizations, at least in the government sector, are not very clear what data is to be kept for how many years. Somebody is keeping it for eternal, somebody is keeping it for few months, etc. Third thing which I should emphasize is that the loosening of security controls for the sake of convenience is a very rampant practice, at least in the government sector. I will admit that higher is the position, more is the convenience-oriented bypassing of the security policy, rules, password policies, etc. This should be curbed, and this can be only curbed by the top management. So I should have all the CISOs should have some years of the top management, so that we can curb this tendency, I will say.
Great input, sir, and thanks for letting us know, giving a very good perspective on the government side of it. So I'll come to Dilip now. Dilip, you've heard all the top security leaders talk about, the trends that they are seeing and what CISO should do. What do you hear from the market, and what are your thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I know we have a really good distinguished guest list out here of speakers, and I think they put across a very right perspective on what's really happening. It's just that the good thing that came out of the pandemic, I look forward to the IT is being in the last 5 or 10 years, IT moved more from a business driver to a business enabler. And with the pandemic, suddenly IT again became the business driver. They're not the supporting roles, right? So if I mean, like Mr. Srikanth said, and also Ravi and Mr. Vijay sir were saying, the IT was looked at the side of, the investing in a lot of technologies, buying a lot of software, buying a lot of hardware, scaling up a lot of investments, and then there was no true sense of an ROI coming to the business itself. But with the pandemic, or the last 12 months plus, most of the businesses are running today on IT, and suddenly there is a big focus and a mainstay focus coming into the IT leaders, whether it's a CISO, CIO, or an infrastructure leader, in terms of how they're able to enable the business to be more digital and to carry on the business more efficiently itself. And the threats are common, rightly, like Mr. Ravi sir was saying. The threats have always been there. It's been there back in those days where we had data thieves who would break into data centers, steal hard drives, chassis, servers, and so on. In the last decade or so, it became more of malware. Before that, we always had viruses and so on. So it's just evolving year on year in a different way. And I think this is just we are just bracing ourselves to the newer versions of it with malware and ransomware and all of these kinds, and we're finding different other ways that it is getting injected to code or into softwares. You've seen a lot of publishers making headlines, including the largest OEMs and platform creators. So the thieves are getting smarter, and the tools and people are also getting smarter. So I think it's constantly a race that's coming about. What I also see a lot of industry leaders are talking to us today is, how can we proactively sort out this and not really be in the news and then fix the issue itself? So they're looking towards newer ways to really understand these incoming threats, might be through artificial intelligence or through log analysis, because this is like a cancer, right? It doesn't overnight show up, or it doesn't happen overnight. It just starts with 1, 2, 3 machines, 5 IDs, 5 accounts, and then it kind of spreads in the organization. So people are leaders are looking towards technologies which can kind of preempt this attack, so they are more planned, and can control it as this becomes more disastrous itself.
Sure, sure. Great infos there, Dilip. So moving on, I'll come back to Mr. Jain again. Sir, I was recently reading a report that said that there was a 600% increase in attacks since March 2020. There has been a 40% increase in the use of remote desktop protocol, which has resulted in RDP ports being left open and exposed to attack. So in such a scenario, when there is a distributed enterprise setup, it has become extremely crucial for CISO cybersecurity leaders to mitigate security risks and enable their enterprise to achieve compliance through securing, controlling, and monitoring cyber assets. What is the best strategy to ensure this?
I think this is a common problem. So when we had a panic in the end of March and April in the early days, a lot of things. Okay, fine. Let us keep it open so that people don't have problem, because the productivity, because the client projects, everything. So I think that panic probably resulted into some of those part, and then people, yes, okay, there's more opportunity for the hackers and all. I think over a period of time, there's more and more interest, more and more responsibility would be to have auto shut off, right? If something has been kept it on, it should alert for a few minutes, maybe after 2 hours or so. And if it doesn't get shut down by 3, it automatically shuts down with a message saying, "Hey, the port was shut down because of this reason." I think those are some of the preemptive measures. Think of it like a Pokayoke measures. That in case you may make a mistake, either it could be alerted or it could be prevented from doing any further damage. Those could be some of the techniques we have tried, and it worked, not just for ports but for other things, for access control and all. It automatically get expired with a notification so that people know what they need to work on. This was one of the area, but the second part was the biggest one, which becomes a lot more handy, is now each of the peng, do we have inventory? So I think in the earlier discussion we talked about, right, we kept multiple copies of the data and everything. I think that if you move more towards what we used to have in something like ISO 9000, wherein everything is numbered, everything has a version number, right? So if you start keeping an inventory about what are the data we have, where it is available, what are the ports we have opened, when, who have opened the port, how long it is, I think the inventory will be helpful, because if you see something sort descending, you will say, fine, these are the ones which somebody have kept open more than one day. I'm going to close them now. So I think some of those simple measures might help mitigate some of those challenges. But again, point goes back to the thing which I heard, which was good option, that if organizations start doing the sponsorship of some of the some of the internet access and everything, people will be less vulnerable for unsecured ports and so on. And yes, it could be an alert. We say, hey guys, these are the 4 employees in your company who is using this kind of internet access. They can be upgraded to the other point. You can easily make out from the IP addresses. So those are some of the things, new ways of preventing some of those from the access control point of view as well.
Sure. Great tips there, sir, by Mr. Mukesh Jain. Ravi sir, your thoughts here, because we've seen email scams and ransomware attacks increasing. Besides, there has been a huge increase in the number of new bad domains opened since March. So, what's the way ahead for CISOs?
See, one of the key things we need to remember is there is no shortcuts for security. I think, see, anybody thinks that I can do a very quick fix. See, the same way you can do a very quick fix, it can also go off very quickly. So security has to be looked at as not as an add-on feature, but as a part of a design by going back to the basics. Some of the things that we should definitely look at is the zero trust architectures. That is basically governing the segregations and micro segmentations. Then identity management. See, this is one of the critical feature which we can do. Typically, it was always done for users, but that needs to be extended to the devices, applications, and APIs. If you all recall, API is a new oil in the new industry now. So identity plays a very important role there. And as I said before, multi-factor authentication is a good defense against some of the intruders for that one. And also mobility solutions, both the MDM and MAMs also play a very good role in this one. But these are all something concepts. What makes the difference between a good security versus a bad security is the execution. See, from the execution perspective, I normally classify it into 3 parts. One is the prevention, which is the best way of preventing the intruders outside. And second thing is the detection. See, detection is a lot of people implemented many tools, but the problem here is the tools will generate tons of alerts. So people have to correlate. See, the attacker won't come and the first time. He will come and do something and slowly start gaining the more and more privileges and do the actual attack at a later time. The correlation between these assets is a very, very important part of it. And third piece is the remediation. And from the prevention perspective, it is a very well-established area where everybody knows that there are a good amount of tools, processes, and techniques already available, and we should implement it. But when it comes to detection, as I said, it is very important is the efficacy of the implementation. Otherwise, ROI will not be realized. Remediation, once the alert is generated, remediation has to be done very fast, and devices and other things will be a lot more easier. But when it comes to the application, it could be tricky because security always takes a one level below the business side decision. So there needs to be a very focus from the management to ensure that security will never be prioritized, always taken as the front end part of it. So if that is the way, we can definitely ensure enterprise as a secure.
Sure. Great, sir. No, I completely agree with you when you said execution is really critical because, once Philip Kotler said, strategy is commodity, execution is art.
Yes.
Absolutely. So coming back to Mr. Srikanth, sir, your thoughts here?
Yeah, see, in the manufacturing side, that last year, I think Honda got attacked on Econ's attack, DP attack. It's another, and recently, if you take out the healthcare, the Dr. Reddy's attack, also a ransomware attack, entire plant itself, they have shut down that case. So such kind of attacks are happening in that. So you should have a proper cybersecurity framework on that. How you are going to control, where is the data side is very, very important, how you are going to protect the data. That is very, very important. You have to focus on those things. So the key learnings on that, it should be understanding the entire structure of life cycle, how the data life cycle, as well as the how you are going to encrypt or how you are going to transmit the data from here to there. how you're going to protect that. So those kind of things you have to. In the automation section, a lot of innovations are happening in the like connected vehicles, or more on connected vehicles are going to start there. So already started connected vehicle, but how are they are protected, or they have a security vigilance on that. So those areas we have to more on. The target attacks are like IoT, connected vehicle. These are all the main areas where the target attacks are happening through RDP or any kind of application. Those things.
Sure, sure. Mr. Devnath, do you agree with the two gentlemen?
I fully agree with them because for their sectors, these things are very, very important: identity and access management, as well as data lifecycle, because they need to maintain that data for the lifecycle of the equipment or the item produced, because it has a very, very long life cycle. Same is the case with our assets also, like locomotives or wagons and all. They have 30, 40 years of lifespan. So a lot of data is supposed to be maintained there. But I would like to add some caution here, for mostly for the non-CISO community, that CIO community and the others. There is a tendency to overreact to the data is the new oil paradigm, or I will say the Mohavra. So as Mr. Jain has also said, that the API is the new plumbing, or the new oil carrying piping. But in the non-IT world, these phrases cause a lot of confusion. As I said earlier, data is the new oil. So they start collecting all data. IoTs are generating data, all our RFID systems are generating data, and all our video surveillance systems are generating data, and all data we are collecting and trying to protect them. The CISO's job to protect them. But there has to be some caution to, if the data is not immediately processed and put into the information repository, then that data is more or less goes waste. We are protecting it uselessly there. So in the data lifecycle, the initial part of data categorization and putting it into the correct information silo is very, very important. And then the cybersecurity protections, identity-based protections, all those things are then applied to that set of data. But what is happening is here that some of the databases are getting data pumped into them at a very, very high rate, and the system is getting overwhelmed by need for the protection, categorization, and all that. There are tools, etc., for all that, but they are designed for a particular size of data. But sometimes they are letting go of the these categorization systems, because the volume of data is too high. So we need to have a control over the data volumes also. Not everything generated by the IoT systems is useful data. That has to be categorized at the source itself and then allowed to flow in the other system and not corrupt the other data systems as well. So that is my caution in going through. As Mr. Ravi said, we have to go back to the basics, that collect data, categorize it, then put it into the proper databases, and then try to protect it through identity and access management systems.
Sure.
That's what I think should be.
Sure. No, great points there, sir. So Dilip, you've heard our esteemed panelists talk about, cutting edge technology or different security models that CISOs may need to adopt going forward. What else comes to your mind when we talk about cybersecurity leaders mitigating security risks and enabling their enterprise to achieve compliance through securing, controlling, and monitoring cyber assets?
Yeah, I think the valid point that everybody was making, it does not stop, right? The amount of attacks, the amount of explosion of data, the amount of things that we are generating on a daily basis is actually quadrupling every now and then, right? This was the recent report that I was reading that there's a ransomware hits every 11 seconds, and most of us today are relying on infrastructures like Microsoft, and you think that they're the best in terms of security standards. There are about 95 million AD accounts attacked daily because identity happens to be the first line of attack, right? I mean, if you need to get into an enterprise, you have to get in through a person or an employee or an identity, and the heart of that is actually managed within an Active Directory, and that's becomes the first line of attack itself. And this is actually leading to a lot of downstream impact within the applications, within the environment, within credibility of organizations, and all of that. And this it does not stop there, right? And it continues to keep going ahead. And what Ravi sir was clearly articulating, and I think he stole most of my words. The real essence is about constantly assessing who and what is accessing what application, what data, what environment, what server, what port, what is it. That is actually uh, uh, you know uh, it's always been done as a reactive mechanism when there's an auditor at your doorstep. But now I think with this new age era where there's constant the fear that we are looming ourselves in, you need to constantly and continuously assess your environment in terms of who's accessing what. And then when you have a potential breach, you are able to immediately get an alert and detect that there is an attack itself into your environment. That is only possible if there is a constant assessment. And even if you are able to curtail or control the impact and remediate yourself quickly, then your business is back and running, and you're not at the hands of a ransom or anybody else, right? So that becomes very critical for most organizations. And I see for the last 2 years or so, uh, there's a lot of discussions around BCP and and BCM, and how do we actually have a more fluid state of an enterprise when it comes to giving employees the trust at what we call as like the work in an environment with zero trust, and give them the full ownership of everything inside the enterprise, as well as ensure that you are not compromised at the same time. So this framework of constantly assessing, uh, having a detection mechanism, and finding a way to remediate and recover is going to be really key for all organizations, because this is not going to be a thing of the past. It's going to continue. It's going to evolve. And for us, even if we are at the receiving end, and if we are at the potential breach, we should know a way to investigate, as well as more importantly recover from the impact itself.
Sure, sure. Great, Dilip. Mr. Ravi talked about identity being really crucial for CISOs going forward. So I want to, delve a little bit on that aspect. Identity definitely has emerged as a critical enabler for digital transformation and an excellent foundation on which to build a security strategy. Mr. Mukesh Jain, is an identity-centered approach to security and cyber resilience the way forward? And how does it compare with data centric security? Because a lot of people talk about data centric security, a lot of people on identity based security. Your thoughts here, sir?
It's a combination. So while I was working at Microsoft, I was there for 13 years, and one of the things we were doing was Windows Live ID. Right? So the identity, what you see right now, the Active Directory was lot of the work, several years worth of work, which come down to that one particular identity. So identity, there's a lot more to just an username and password, right? So what do you do with that? And I'm sure some of you would have seen already when an access happens from an unknown device, it goes for multi-factor authentication. At the same time, when you're reusing the same device, it does not come for that. So that is the combination of user experience and all. But now the more and more interest is about data. right? So looking at the pattern, not just the device per se, but the pattern, how you do it, because it's comparatively easier nowadays to spoof an IP address and so on. So now what you are doing is, now more and more people are moving towards data. So it will be a good combination of those. When I say data, is not just about data privacy, which I know we talked about it earlier in the sessions as well, in the past sessions. But I think the more important part is what do we do with the data security as well, plus how do you connect the data with the identity, so the right people have not just access to the right data, but be able to have authority to share it further or not. There are, the issue doesn't happen when the authoritative person share the data. It's about when you give it to somebody and somebody else forward to somebody else, right? So all of those elements brings it to a concept called traceability. We have done traceability in the past, but now more and more requests are coming for data traceability. Can we really do that part? And now with increased focus on companies sharing data, I'm not talking about what we hear in the news, right? I'm not taking any names, but keeping the privacy intact and no PII sharing. Can we even have the data which can be used for general knowledge and maybe general research and also on and so forth? I think those are some of the new ways of think will happen. More opportunities with that, but at the same time cannot compromise on security with these new opportunities.
Sure, sure. Mr. Srikanth, what are your thoughts with respect to identity-based security? Because identities have evolved far beyond people today. In addition to employees, partners, and customers, identities now include connected devices, applications, services, and machines that power modern business. So, what do you think about it?
No, identity is required because identity is the main area where we have to focus because data centric is very, very important on the identity access management. See, so people who are an employing should have an identity on how, where the right people, right time they are taking the data or not. That very, very important, and how you are managing the data, the identity access management. So moreover, this IAM or best practices, if you take it out or something, we should have a proper control over the data, where we are storing and how you are encrypting. Those things are all very, very important things. So yes, as a part of, as Mr. Jain has said, it is very, very important to have a proper structure and have a framework for that, how data should be in a proper way. That's very important.
Sure, sure. Dilip, what's your take on this, on data identity centric or identity based security, cyber security?
Yeah, identity is identity management or access management is not something new to for all the industry leaders, right? I mean, it's done in different ways and formats, and we're seeing it come back again for in the new era itself. And I think what's becoming interesting this time around is they want to all corporates and all leaders want to ensure that the right people have the right access to the right information, right? I as a person need not consume data that's not required for me. Rather, I have been provisioned to give the right amount of data and to what my job role entitles to be more successful, right? So that's becoming very key out here, right? And of late we've been seeing uh, access certification, access governance, who accesses what, is it being given the right resources, the right applications, the right server rights, and are you able to invoke or request those accesses at the right time? And it's going to be like a seamless experience for the user who accesses this right, and constantly have maintaining and provisioning newer streams of data is what leaders are asking us today. And what we also hear from the market or from the IT fraternity that we speak is uh, there is a lot of mandate from the governing bodies, especially government, especially from RBI, especially from the other agencies, which says the governance of data is more important than anything else, right? I mean, most of us have a single username, password. All those challenges have gone way far away. But now it's become about the data integrity can be maintained only if we keep the right checks and balances. And that checks and balances is a mixture of two things. One is the business logic and how you provision the right data, because you can have somebody who is interconnected in terms of having two application rights without having a proper delegation of duty or segregation of duty. He's accessing some other application. So how do you build that business logic into your identity governance becomes very, very successful for an organization to actually give or empower the employees itself. So this has become a very key thing. We've seen some leading banks in India who have spoken to us, and interestingly, even public sector banks, they are also looking to put these kind of mechanisms in place. We're seeing that also with IT, ES companies, IT and ITES, also on the manufacturing side, and also towards the government. I mean, government's also very, very interested on what kind of data is available, and this is all from the same challenges that everybody has been saying. You have a tablet, you have a pad, you have a mobile phone. So different ways, different streaming of information. That integrity has to actually be got right at the first stage.
Sure, Dilip. Great. Moving on, I'll come to Mr. Ravi again. Ravi sir, to stay abreast with the changing cybersecurity landscape, CISOs today need a comprehensive array of cyber resilience solutions that provide in-depth defense across many layers. How can security leaders deploy such a solution? Today the market is anyways cluttered with so many cybersecurity solutions. What is the best approach for a CISO?
See, what is important here is this. See, when you're talking about multiple layers, what is important is the getting a right framework in place. When I say right framework, is something like a ISO, NIST, or HIPAA. I mean, if you go for some of the domain-based security, PCI DSS, these are all govern a standards that work across the layers. And we should really look at it. And also don't forget the physical security. I think we always talk about the lot of resources, IT resources, network resources and all. But what is important is that take one of those framework that is best suited for the respective enterprise and include the physical security and customize it for the their own need. On top of that, you have, once you have a framework in place, then at every layer you have a many more solutions like, see, application level WAFs you have it, and you have the zero architecture, zero trust architectures for you to ensure that you give the right segmentation and also right accesses for that one. And we also talked about identity solutions. But one is the most important, Lisa, in the previous thing, we also talked about data security. And that is where is both the MAM and MDM plays a vital role. See, today, the theft is not somebody is breaking into your enterprise. It can also happen through somebody is picking up a phone where you have an access to many of the applications on that one. So both the MAM and MDM will play a very important role. Both of them have some overlapping functionality, but I think if we can do both, that really secure the enterprise. So we should be able to erase the data when we have implemented this one. And with the NIST or one of these frameworks, I think we should be able to secure the enterprises against any of the threats.
Sure. Mr. Devnath, sir.
Yes. Same.
Yes, sir, same question, sir. Yeah. So
Yeah.
What can CISOs do to provide defense in depth across many layers? What kind of a
Yeah.
solution should they adopt?
I will say from my experience, we have gone for last few years, we have gone for lot of layered security, as we call it. Lot of layers are there, from starting from the developer DevOps security, where we are having tools to scan through the code, and then stress testing, then testing on the production systems, then identity management, and then continuous web auditing as well, cloud-based auditing. A lot of tools are there. But what I find practically is that number one, in government systems, many a times these solutions come from different OEMs, and we struggle to make them work together within a framework or maybe outside the framework as well. Implementation of a particular ISMS framework or ISO 27001 controls is on paper, becomes somewhat easier, but getting the organization as a whole to follow those controls in the compliance stage is becoming very difficult, and the number of tools from various OEMs is not helping at least the CISO either. And we are spending a lot of time in getting these solutions to talk to each other properly. And third very important issue is that once the solution is in place and it has worked well, subsequently maintaining it through the update cycles and patching and all that, because all the tools need patching as well, is again a matter of both funding as well as training the right resources. In the government, we face the challenge of retaining the good resources and across the transfers and recruitment and retention. So that is one issue. So I wish that the solution providers, they have a approach towards a defined approach towards simplifying and making the tool as comprehensive as possible. And they should also think about how to check the compliance of their systems or the implemented policies across the HR spectrum, because not all HR is technically savvy to use their tools in a particular way. So if a lower level employee is unable to use that tool or is unable to be productive because of that tool and policies, sure, they should have an approach where he or she should also be given some amount of mind share in their implementation framework.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Great. So Dilip, you heard Mr. Devnath. He's got lots of asks, expectations from solution providers. You are a security solution provider. Do you think there is a solution out there in the market that can really a pill for all ills for CISOs?
Yeah, I think that's a very warranted ask from Mr. Devnath. So there's no one trick pony which does it all. So you cannot, right? If you go to a circus as well, there is not just one act, there are multiple acts, right? And I think this, furthermore, if you simplify this, it's about how you look to implement these strategies. Are you looking to implement your security at the perimeter level? That's in terms of firewall, in terms of the point of entry into your environment, or you're looking to put security at the layer of an application, or you're looking to see where does it can spread within your organization itself, right? That is in terms of the endpoint or the machine that's actually accessing all of this application and firewalls and all of that stuff. So I think it's very prudent for all leaders to really segmentize and see, okay, if I have invested really well on my firewall and I know this is a non-breakable layer, how do I focus on a layer like maybe my on middle of my stuff like infrastructure, or if I do it on my application layer in terms of governance of data and so on. If those are already been taken care in terms of identity management, data governance and so on, endpoint becomes really critical itself, right? And endpoint, the reason I say endpoint is there is so much of constant activity that is going on within the endpoint. One, an asset, that is your laptop or a computer or a tablet, which is accessing those applications, if it is left in a coffee shop, if you left it in the train or you left it in the airport, and there's a hacker who walks by, or somebody is stealing that, he's got access into that environment because it's already authenticated. How are you constantly ensuring and pushing these patches, deploying these images to that endpoint, and how are you securing that endpoint itself? Now, that endpoint can be within your perimeter, it can be outside your perimeter, and then constantly pushing these patches and upgrades, because with all these news, the recent headlines, all OEMs, right, whether it's a software OEM, hardware OEM, everyone is constantly updating, because they don't know who's the smart one out there, the smart rookie who's going to put the next ransomware in one of the bigger publishers, right? So people are writing constant updates, and that's all classifiable and available to us who are the customers of these OEMs. But what is the use of that patch or an upgrade or that security packet if it has not reached the endpoint, like a browser or an OS or the software itself? So that becomes very, very critical. And if I take to Mr. Devnath's thing, I'm sure they have assets, more than 100,000 assets, or even for example, even Mr. Mukesh, it's almost 3 lakh employees or 4 lakh employees in Capgemini. How do you patch across the enterprise? You have servers, you have networks, you have firewalls, you have so many things. So that becomes very, very critical. And this is thought about by at least the more sensitive people to security, like the banks in the banking sector. We see it very, this has been already mandated by RBI, I think about 3 or 5 years back, that you should have an automated patching solution to really deploy patches on a constant basis, and ensure that the endpoints are not vulnerable. So you're at least able to block, isolate each of these vulnerable points. If it is an endpoint, you're able to secure it by constant patching with a solution from Quest, or you're doing something on the identity management, which also Quest is a leader in that. You're taking the layer of governance, or you're thinking, I want to really invest on my perimeter. I have to look to firewall kind of technologies. So it's about how we categorize and prioritize what has not been addressed and what is the gray area.
Sure. Great, Dilip. Great answer there. So we're fast running out of time, gentlemen. So one final question to all of you before we open up the session for questions from our attendees. So I'll request all of you to be very crisp, concise in your responses. Just 1 or 2 sentences maximum. I'll start with Mr. Mukesh Jain, sir. What best practice comes to your mind that CISO should adopt to stay ahead of the cybersecurity curve in the new normal?
I would say start adopting data and artificial intelligence. I think that is the next big thing. We will not just be able to prevent it, and also be able to detect it in time.
Great. Mr. Devnath.
I will say my top priority or the best practice will be that the top leaders in the organization should demonstrate as role models, following the compliance as made in the policy, and so that the people below are also motivated or inspired to follow them.
Great. Mr. Srikanth.
The critical assets should be hardened and continuous monitoring, and should have a proactive threat hunting tool to find out the vulnerabilities. Those are my main areas. And the awareness is very, very important.
Sure. Great. Mr. Ravi.
I say it needs to be paranoid, because there are a lot of tools, but if you are not paranoid, you will not look in the right direction. And second thing is the benchmark against a security. I mean, you should know how good you are, how bad you are. I mean, some of the examples like a BitSight scores, where
Sure.
I mean, typically we are around 800. And the most important part is human security. You need to take employees as your partners. That will ensure everything else.
Sure. Great. Final thoughts, final comments from you, Dilip?
Yeah, I think all the leaders summed it up very well. I think it's more on the soft layer. We really have to educate employees, people who are accessing that, because that's the first level of attack. So I think that as much as we trust and believe in them, continuous education is definitely a must. And on the harder part, leaders, business leaders really need to look at solutions or strategies. What is it for the next 3 years and 5 years horizon? Because this is a very constantly evolving landscape. The fundamentals have to be strong, and only then you could have niche technologies like AI and ML and all of that working on it. So I think if you're not got your fundamentals right, it is very important to get those right, and then you build on that with the superficial layer.
Sure. Great inputs there from all our esteemed panelists. We'll now open up the session for questions from our attendees. We've got some questions, and I think given the time that we have on hand, we can take up 2 or 3 questions. The first one is, how do we see passwordless login in securing identity threats? And what are potential risks with biometric logins? Anybody wants to take it up?
So biometric, see, that is definitely the one. Typically, if you say one factor, second factor, and third factor, I think just to replace with one factor is a big risk factor. So you always need 1, 2, 3, but how many I need it depends on the context. So based on the context, depends on the devices, what you're doing, what type of application you're doing, type of patterns, you can invoke 1, 2, and 3 automatically. That will ensure the security to a greater extent.
Sure. I hope that answers the question. Anybody else who wants to respond to it?
Yeah, we've seen a recent trend in this password reset and password management, especially with people not being within the firewalls and within the organization. They're remotely working and so on. Without having a trust or a VPN connectivity, how do you do offline password resets? And what Ravi sir directly said, having an MFA, having those questions, which was your maiden name and maiden school and so on and so forth, and then probably having a soft token, hard token, or an SMS, and also giving the flexibility to the employees to reset password on their will, because you don't want to be doing mundane old activities of having help desk, receiving calls, doing password reset, and we rather spend the time on doing something more effective. So password resets have become increasingly important, and how do you do offline resets have become the new era.
Sure. Great. Okay. So coming to the next question. Okay. So any thoughts on the SolarWinds chaos and how it could have been avoided? Gentleman wants to know. The SolarWinds hack that happened some time back, very recently, targeted the US establishments, organizations. Anybody, any of the panelists wants to share his views, thoughts on how could SolarWinds kind of a hack be prevented?
It's $1 million question.
I'm sure it won't have a simple answer. But anyway, sir, your thoughts?
No, I think, see, of course, see, it's always computing power is, it's at a disposal of anyone and everyone. And second thing is that always a vulnerability from social engineering. See, if we combine the computing power, social engineering, and gullibility of the people who actually do it, and also loose building of applications for especially escalation, privilege escalations of, I think any one of them or combination of them could have caused it.
Okay, so one final question before we wrap up the session. Though organizations are doing a lot to put guideline for cybersecurity, but the compliance is an issue. How can organizations plan to address the compliance, the area of compliance, basically? That's the question. Security along with compliance. How can compliance be adhered to, or how can CISOs ensure their organization is compliant?
See, the compliance is always, as I said, the frameworks are the important. If you ask a person to do something extra for security, they will never do it. So it has to be baked into our internal IT systems. See, as I keep doing it, my work, as I completing my tasks, and if I also go and comply for the standards, then automatically compliance also will be ensured. See, typically, if you look at any of the today's ITGC or a SOC or any compliance, if you look at it, so that is not something new. It's always, if the systems are not robust enough, that is going to create a lot of problems. So it has to be built into the IT systems. It's not a add-on for the people to do it, then compliance is automatically ensured.
Sure. Great, gentlemen. I think that's all we have time for. We hope the insights shared by our experts today will go a long way in mitigating security risks and enabling your enterprise to achieve compliance through securing, controlling, and monitoring cyber assets. With this, we would like to bring the session to a close. I would once again like to thank our esteemed panelists for their wonderful insights and our attendees for sparing time for this session. Thank you all. Stay healthy, stay safe.